Charles, we've got a very special guest today. We're joined by Judge Jeanine Pirro. Judge, hello and welcome back to the show.
Well, it's good to talk to you guys again. I know that we both, all three of us actually, have been in the trenches trying to make sense of the crazy world that we're living in. And every day it seems that we're getting closer, and then something even crazier happens. So I thought it was time to write another book. And I wrote this book because it seems like America is upside down now in terms of the First Amendment, the Constitution, the presumption of innocence, the capitalist system, and on and on. So I thought that it'd be a good idea to hit the road again, and I'm glad to be able to talk to you guys.
Well, we're delighted to have you on, and your new book, Radicals, Resistance, and Revenge, it came out August 27th. It's getting a fair amount of mention in the press. Are you excited by the reaction you're getting so far on it?
Well, you know, it's interesting because the New York Times had, the first week it was out, they put me at number 3. And I thought it was interesting because if you look at it objectively, the book sold, and I'm very grateful to the people who bought it, bought them, 27,000 books, I think 27,900 or something. And Michelle Obama sold 9,000. So the last I checked, 27,000 is 3 times that. But the New York Times decided that she needed to be number 2 and I needed to be number 3. And it gets even better. Number 1 sold fewer books than I did as well.
And who wrote number 1?
There's a book called Educated. I haven't read it, but it's not a political book at all. But it's kind of interesting when you have an objective criteria by which to assess how well a book is selling and how America is reacting to a book. It's usually BookScan, and even the New York Times, although they made my last book number 1, is kind of wasn't willing to go that far this time, which was certainly disappointing, but not surprising, and it really speaks to the very essence of what this book is about. And it is the fact that, you know, everything is backwards. The fake news media is, you know, alive and well, and, you know, there are so many of us who are believers, and we want to believe in the system, and in that regard, I mean, I have been a prosecutor, a judge, and a DA for 30 years. I ran for office 5 times just to keep those jobs, and I got to tell you, if something doesn't happen as a result of the corruption in Washington, then Jeanine Pirro, you know, as a person who believed in the system and fought for the system, will be devastated because when you put your faith in the system and you believe in it and you live your life according to it, and then you realize that there's more corruption for which there is no accountability, it becomes not just disappointing, but out and out depressing.
Well, thank you for your long struggle, and I certainly know that people know of your close friendship with the president, and you're the great person to ask this question. I mean, the president has been putting up, he never even got a honeymoon. He just immediately, right, and he immediately was treated to torrents of, let's just call it mud, unending negative stories and now false accusations, the witch hunt and all that kind of stuff. What is his state of mind, do you think? And when is he going to drop hammers? Because there are obvious hammers that could be dropped now to get these co-conspirators, these corrupt, treasonous people who I think have committed sedition.
Well, you know, every time the president tries to do something, they start yelling impeach. But I saw him, what day is today? Today's Monday. I think I saw him on Thursday. And, you know, he is, was it Thursday? I'm pretty sure it was, yeah, it was Thursday. He is in such good spirits. I mean, you know, the man who gets the incoming every day from the day, as you say, he walked into the Oval and wasn't even given a honeymoon period. You know, he has an enormous ability to continue to fight. And I suspect that in your question, you want to know when are indictments coming down. Well, I think that, you know, he picked a guy, Bill Barr, that he has faith in. And whether or not Bill Barr goes forward, you know, we'll see. Look, Bill Barr decided not to prosecute Jim Comey for lying and leaking. I get it. I wouldn't have handled it the same way, but, you know, he decided the first case against the head of the FBI was not going to be a case that some might see in the District of Columbia, a left-leaning jury, something that wasn't that important, that they would see as they might be led to believe was political. I think, though, that the FISA warrant and the fraud on the court is something that has to be prosecuted. And if it isn't prosecuted, then that's a real problem. But you have to understand, the president has been fighting the deep state every inch of the way. And every time he opens his mouth, there's some big mouth in the White House, you know, who's got to leak it according to his or her perspective, and then they want to impeach. You know, it's like I said on my show Justice last night. I said, you know, the week started with let's remake the Supreme Court, and let's get Brett Kavanaugh. And even though there was no victim not willing to talk, victim didn't remember anything, and the person who brought it forward was a Clinton lawyer. I mean, give me a break. A Clinton lawyer, and the New York Times runs with this story, and these idiots in Congress are like, we got to impeach him, enough is enough. You don't even have a complaint. You don't even have a victim. You don't even have someone who recalls if something even happened. And her memory is that she doesn't remember anything. And yet everyone running for president is like, let's impeach Brett Kavanaugh. These people have lost their minds. They do not believe in the process. They do not believe in the presumption of innocence. They do not believe in putting their evidence where their allegations are. And you know what? I blame one person for that, if there's one person to blame, and that's Jim Comey. And Charles, you know I worked with Comey when I was the elected DA. He was U.S. attorney. We were there at the same time. His office, his building was next to mine, and we worked on cases. You know, Jim Comey, when he leaked that information to get to the New York Times, which clearly was something that Bill Barr could have prosecuted, okay? Jim Comey's the one person who's responsible for the fracture in this nation, where everyone was at everyone else's throat as to whether or not Donald Trump, a businessman from New York, was a Putin puppet, a Russian asset, or anything else. And the only person who had their finger on the scale was not the Russians, it was Jim Comey and his band of conspirators there between Andrew McCabe and Peter Strzok and his gumad there, Lisa Page. It's outrageous what happened. And yet, we're going more and more left. And I have a chapter in the book called The Democrat Clown Car. I mean, these bozos, every one of them, want capitalism, want socialism instead of capitalism. And then you got that genius, Elizabeth Warren, who says, no, I have a bill to make sure that capitalism survives. What's her bill? The bill is to make sure if you own a company, the shareholders aren't the most important people that you divvy up the funds with. It's got to go to the community, then it's got to go to global issues, any profits have to go to this group, that group, the other group. It's socialism. Medicare for all, that's socialism. I mean, this country has an economy that's soaring, and these bozos are tripping over their clown shoes to prove that they're going to the left so that people will vote for them. I'm telling you, middle America is not into this because they see that we've got the best economy, more jobs and people to fill them, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, women. I mean, and all they said was Russia, Russia, Russia. And then it's racism, racism, racism. And you know, then it was Brett Kavanaugh, and now, you know, it's going to be, oh, this whistleblower in the Ukraine. When they, you know, every time, it's like my last book, the boomerang is when the Democrats point the finger, it always comes back at them. You know, Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is making millions out of the Ukraine, where Joe Biden has the balls and the stupidity to say, you know, when I went in there and I told them they're not getting their $1 billion unless they get this prosecutor out of there. He admitted it. Yeah. You're leveraging American tax dollars for foreign policy because they're investigating your son? Are you kidding me? Well, and they're worried about Donald Trump. It's frustrating.
Well, you know, on the subject of Comey and Mueller and Rosenstein, you know, I'm amazed that even Fox has not hit this as hard as you might, which is that when we think about why the resistance occurred and why Mueller was so aggressive and why Rosenstein, in my view, was so crooked and Comey also was so crooked, the reason is those three people were centrally involved in a 4-year investigation of the Clinton Foundation from 2001 that missed obvious frauds through 2005. And I don't understand why, people aren't focusing on that and say, no, wait a minute. These guys have a motive to go after Trump, because if the public really understood what Comey, what Rosenstein, what Mueller missed, they'd be up in arms. And
well, go ahead.
No, and so that's one thing. And the other thing that I think is worth mentioning is I believe it's the case that you can be impeached after you leave office. And
really?
Yes. And when you go and you think about Bill Clinton, and I know you're one of America's and the world's experts on prosecuting sex trafficking crimes. When you think about Epstein's actual close relationship with Bill and Hillary Clinton in the period 2001 through 2005 and afterwards, I mean, that whole period and the many connections between Epstein and Clinton and the Clinton mafia, that needs to be looked at hard, both for what actually happened and why did the FBI get into this a lot more aggressively, going all the way back to 2001, if not earlier.
Well, I mean, you asked the $64,000 question several times. You, Charles, and I know you've done your research, you are one of the few people who understand the connection between Jim Comey and the Clinton Foundation. He was supposed to be investigating it, and at the same time, he had an interest in it as well, in making sure that Hillary, was able to go scot clean, and they never pursued issues like the proper accounting methods and the proper accounting, whatever it is, reviews. And, if you look at Jim Comey's background, you realize that he's invested in Hillary long before this email investigation, which was not an investigation. Do you remember how many process crimes there were in this Russia case? Process crime, of course, being a crime that stems from an investigation, but not from the underlying investigation, but like crimes like, oh, you lied to the FBI, like Michael Flynn or Michael Cohen. Notice there was none of that in the Hillary Clinton case because they never did an investigation. They never did, 500 search warrants, 2,600 subpoenas. They never did any of that stuff. The only thing they did under the guise of Jim Comey and Loretta Lynch was to give everybody immunity. And when you segue to the issue of the Clintons and the Epsteins, Bill Clinton, apparently when Epstein, he first was arrested in the Southern District here a few months back, he said, oh, yeah, I was on the plane a couple times. He was on that Lolita Express 27 times, according to the logs on the plane. And he was on that plane at the time that there was a lot going on. And for some reason, Epstein is dead. For some reason, the medical examiner was in a rush to call it a suicide when the hyoid bone was broken. And I've tried murder cases that involve a hyoid bone, and it's always an intentional strangulation. The hyoid bone, especially with the forensic in that cell, with a guy who was on his knees is 4 feet high, and the bed itself, the bunk bed being 5.5 feet, no matter how hard you push your neck against that sheet, you could not break the hyoid bone. So there's a lot going on there, and I will tell you that I was on the phone right away when that case broke, when I realized that Alex Acosta was the Secretary of, I think it was Labor, and he was the prosecutor on that case who did things that no prosecutor has ever done before, and that is protect the names of the co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein, who were given immunity, just like they gave immunity in Hillary Clinton's email case. And now, all of those co-conspirators are prevented from being prosecuted and being outed. And a judge in Florida refuses to out the names of them. And you and I, Charles, could figure out real easy about 5 of the names on that list. It's shocking to me. Shocking.
Do you know whether that's just for crimes relating to sex trafficking or for all crimes?
I think that, and I don't want to answer if I'm not absolutely sure, but it may be just sex trafficking, crimes like that. But it may be more prophylactic. I don't know. It may cover more. But when the judge recently, I think it was just last week, said, I'm not going to release the names, it was stunning. First of all, they can't be protected ad infinitum when you know, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know who those conspirators are. There's got to be a sealed document somewhere saying who they are. Giselle, or whatever her name is, Ghislaine Maxwell, I mean, she was the madam. What if she's in there as a co-conspirator? Are they really prevented from prosecuting that woman? I certainly hope not.
Well,
but the parallels there are frightening.
Well, I can tell you, though, I don't know how much you've gotten into this, Jeanine, but Ghislaine and the lawyer Martin Indyk and Epstein and many people figure in multiple charity frauds that occurred at the same time. And maybe those and those are actionable. These are New York State, there are several New York State charity frauds that are not past the statute of limitations that could be prosecuted if you can't get them on sex trafficking.
Well, you know what? Who would that be? The Attorney General. Who is the Attorney General? Is it Letitia James?
Right, but aren't we now to a place where it certainly looks to me as if the Attorney General of New York State has decided to prosecute conservatives and Trump supporters and to ignore and let Clinton supporters and Obama supporters skate for massive, massive charity frauds that have been ongoing for decades. And I'm not in law enforcement, but at a certain point, doesn't the FBI have the right, or Department of Justice, to say this is a rogue Attorney General and a rogue Justice Department, and we need to have a special master or some process to, you know, restore justice in New York State?
Well, you know, that's what this guy Christopher Wray was supposed to do. And the first time he testified before Congress, and he was in 2017, I said to myself, this guy's as much deep state as the rest of them, refusing to hand over documents that Congress was asking for. You know, so what are you going to do? You're going to get a whistleblower, and the whistleblower will be protected, but then you've got to get someone who's willing to prosecute the cases. You know, and would it be Bill Barr? You know what? I'll answer that question when we find out what he's going to do with the FISA report, with the Inspector General's report on the FISA case that they're now cleansing of the privileged and classified information. And we'll find out when this guy Durham in Connecticut finishes his investigation. Look, for me, hope springs eternal. I hope someone's going to do something here. And I believe that if they start prosecuting for these cases, for wrongdoing, I don't care what party you're in, it's wrongdoing, then maybe there's a chance, Charles, to bring those cases to them. And, you know, I'll be happy to help you out with that.
Oh, thank you so much, Judge. And thanks for all your great work. I know you're pressed for time, but I got to ask you one more question, if you don't mind. What is it going to take for the Fox senior executives to have you on 5 days a week?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd be on 5 days a week.
Yeah.
You know, look, I love what I do. I love my job, and that's why, you know, I write books. I mean, I'm only on 1 day a week, and I'm very grateful that, you know, my viewership is the biggest viewership all weekend, all day Saturday night, all day Sunday night. I mean, to me, it's shocking. Every time I say it, I can't believe it. And, you know, I don't know what to tell you, Charles. Maybe you can get the answer. But in the meantime, you know, you got to get my book, and, you know, we'll probably write another one in the next year as well. But in the world of Trump, the news that travels so quickly, and there's so much going on, there's always a lot to talk about.
Well, you're very gracious with your time. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for doing these great books, and keep up the fantastic work. I know Jason's wide and growing viewership is going to want to go and buy your book, encourage other people to buy it and read it, and it's
easy to find at Amazon. Radicals, Resistance, and Revenge.
Judge, before you go, because it's so relevant to the title of the book and everything that's been going on, you've been talking about fake news, etc. We've been hearing for the past few days that, you know, Donald Trump communicating with a foreign leader about, you know, trying to actually prosecute what sounds like multi-million, even billion-dollar corruption is somehow an impeachable offense. I feel like we are in a black as white world more than ever before. Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, well, look, I don't know what the subject of the call is, but all the leaks seem to indicate the president was on the phone with a foreign leader. Some people think it was the president of Ukraine, and every time the president's on the phone with a foreign leader, there are 25 other people on the phone from the other country, this country, and there's some whistleblower who thinks, oh my gosh, there's urgent concern, the president said something. Now, if, as they suspect, if the president said, I want you to look into Joe Biden, leveraging or whatever, a case that should be looked at, and as long as the president, didn't ask for a quid pro quo or say, and I want to make sure this guy's prosecuted, and you're not going to get any money until this investigation is done, or you'll get more money, as long as there's no qualifier or condition. The president is a president of the United States, and he has the absolute, unequivocal right to request another president who was involved, who's in a country that was involved in a possible shakedown by a vice president, so that his son can continue to make, almost $1 billion a year on an issue he has absolutely no background or expertise, where the vice president himself has actually admitted that he went in and said, if this prosecutor isn't gone, you're not getting the money, American money. I mean, this is outrageous.
Yeah,
it is.
And the president has every right, and in fact, I think it should ask what happened in that situation. He has every right to find that out.
Totally agree.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Hopefully that will happen. Judge, thanks so much for joining us. And of course, all of our viewers are going to want to go out and purchase Radicals, Resistance, and Revenge, either from Amazon.com or perhaps a retailer that's not controlled by the CIA. Thank you so much, Judge Jeanine. Everyone is going to look forward to seeing you on Fox and reading the book.
Thank you. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good night, and thanks to your listeners. Bye.
Take
Bye.
care.